welcome to the second show Sunday of a month because we're cheaters.
It's fine.
So I showed these two 6 episodes from Star Wars: The Clone Wars season 2. And if you don't know, so you might be wondering why season 2. So the first thing to come out regarding about this show was actually a theatrical movie, and I actually saw it in theaters.
Wait, it showed in theaters? It wasn't one of those direct to TV channel
it was
things?
actually in theaters.
Oh wow.
And it's not great. I think it's hated more than it should be, but it's still not good. So it's to me, watching it, it's okay, but if it doesn't, let me put it this way. I watched it when this came out in theaters, but I didn't watch the actual show until I was in college.
Wow.
So it wasn't oh boy, it was a great movie, I want to totally see this show that's based off of this movie. No, right? So
Yeah.
so it's not a great way of getting into it. And then also season 1 is just kind of also in a similar vein mostly, where it's okay, but not really that interesting. And what's nice is that there is a continuity, there is an overall plot, stuff that happens, influences later things, but the episodes are divided up into arcs, and so you can kind of skip some stuff that's not, you just don't really care about. So I picked basically. So that's why I kind of just skipped through season 1. There's a few things in season 1 that I think are kind of worth checking out. I almost kind of recommend the film in a sense that just partly just to see, okay, this is the start, and then also to know that everything else I would recommend is just better. so just the sense okay, this is the worst it's going to get. All right, fine, right? And it's not even that. I don't think it's that bad or anything. And then there's a couple other arcs, for example, it sort of introduces kind of a main group of clones in season 1, and then there's also kind of the last main arc of season 1 is decent. So there's that. But so I picked the first 3 episodes of season 2, which I guess I would call the Cad Bane arc, and then the episodes 12, 13, and 14, which is the Duchess Satine arc. So I picked these for a couple reasons. I thought carefully about this. So I mean, first of all, I think probably these 2 arcs are the best ones of season 2. But even then, they're definitely not in my top 10 arcs. They're definitely not in my top 15 arcs. They're probably not in my top 20 arcs. So even what I showed you, I think a lot of stuff for this show is better than this, even then. But I picked this for a couple reasons. One is that the Cad Bane arc, I think, is just kind of a good arc for just sort of showing kind of overall how things kind of work. Here's kind of its own self-contained story. It introduces a new character, but you also see you see Anakin, and you see Obi-Wan, and you see Ahsoka, and you see kind of how they work off of each other, and also some other things, just kind of the general air of everything, right? So that's why I chose that one. And then the Duchess Satine arc I chose because the character who is not used that much in the Cad Bane arc is Obi-Wan, and so he's definitely much more of a focus in the Satine arc, so that's one reason. And also because it deals with Mandalore a lot, and we were watching The Mandalorian, so seeing that comparison I think would be interesting for you. And then also that arc kicks off a lot of stuff later in this show. So I said about how you can choose to skip some arcs, the stuff with Satine, even though I don't think I think it's good, but definitely there's a lot of other stuff that's better in the show. I would say the Satine arc, you have to watch it just to get what's gonna happen later. That is really good. So I think they're good starting places for things to go over. So that was kind of my philosophy for choosing these episodes. But with that out of the way, I guess open to you to just comment on what you think.
Anakin and Padme were way more likable in this than in the prequels.
Yeah, even though Padme we saw, and she said 3 lines, I was like, I like Padme. I never thought I would ever say that, but I like Padme.
Yeah, there's...
It's almost like if you make good writing and dialogue, then the characters are not flat.
Yeah.
It's like they have emotions and everything, and Anakin's actually pretty snarky and sarcastic and everything, and I'm like, that did not, like, in the films, you can't tell that whatsoever because of, like, the flat delivery and everything.
He's either flat or he's butt mad.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, actually, there's a couple arcs, and I don't even think they're, like, that great, they're just kind of, like, decent, but there are a couple arcs that do actually focus kind of on, like, the politics side of things. But at least but it's, like, with a lot of it, like, following Padme. But at the same time, like, even though I don't think it's, like, it's decent just for this show, but compared to the actual movies, it's like, oh, this is, like, way better done and way more interesting, and, you know.
Yeah.
Actually kind of curious how things go with that. And, yeah, I would say that, like, I remember I kind of had, like, an informal list of, like, my favorite Star Wars characters, and my rule was that I had to base the character on all of their canon appearances.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of that, I was like, damn it. Why does Anakin have to be so split? Because Clone Wars Anakin, if I could, like, just take Clone Wars Anakin by himself, he would easily be top 5 Star Wars characters. I think I think I had him, like, in my head, I think I said Demai, I think it was, like, 3rd or 4th.
3rd or 4th, yeah.
So, yeah. But it's not just Clone Wars Anakin, so... problem. But...
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but he's done quite well.
It's also nice seeing him, like, because I guess in the prequels, his entire focus is on Padme, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, a little bit with Obi-Wan, but otherwise it's mainly with Padme, while here in the show you see him interacting with, like, Ahsoka, and then you see him interacting with, like, the clones, and then R2-D2 also.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in the prequels, the only likable character is Obi-Wan.
Well, and
but now he's not all by himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and the... What was I gonna say? I don't know, but just the fact that, like, I remember someone said that, like, there was some video that was talking about how they were not gonna watch this show unless they were convinced that Anakin was done well. And even when they were told, like, Anakin was done well, they're like, I still don't believe you. But, yeah, so there you go. Anakin is done well, and that's... Because it makes it, like, you know, because especially if you just watch the movies, it's like, how did this happen, right?
Yeah.
But here...
And it makes me sad that you don't see Ahsoka in, like, the last prequel, because I like her dynamic with Anakin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I feel like that would have been, like, really interesting to see, like, how that would have played out, like, if she was with Obi-Wan and Padme on the ship and everything.
I guess then again, if she was in the prequels, they would have fucked her up, so...
Yeah.
That is also true.
Yeah, but, well, that actually, so that speaks to kind of the creative process behind the show to begin with. So, this show the beginning of it started actually pretty much right after, like, Revenge of the Sith came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically like, okay, these movies were not received that well. So, we are not going to, like, get rid of anything. Okay, they're not going to be like, they're not going to replace anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're instead going to take what we have and make it better by adding things and tweaking things, but not in a way that actually, like, changes anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because the main thing, okay, so George Lucas, he in the original trilogy, he made the first, you know, he was the guy who made the first movie, of course. But, like, even then, he had a lot of help and input from other people. He didn't direct either of those movies. He didn't direct Empire, he didn't direct Return of the Jedi. So he was obviously very involved in making them, but he wasn't the actual director.
Right.
And so then, and even, like, I remember there was a thing about how for the original movie that he did direct and, like, write it or whatever, like, there was a thing where Harrison Ford and like Mark Hamill and those guys, they were kind of like always making fun of him for writing bad dialogue, and then they would like fix it while they're there. But when time for the prequels came out, everyone was like, "Oh, George Lucas, he made the wonderful Star Wars movies. He could do no wrong," and basically just let him do whatever he wanted. And so people have said like he's really good at like designing things from like a broad, big scale, but he's bad at like the small, like the pieces of that scale, right? The actual dialogue and like the directing and like getting. He's good at creating a great thing, but he's not really great at actually demonstrating what that thing is.
I guess it's like he's good at like planning a mural and stuff like that, but when it comes to like actually
he's a great painter.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So he was similarly though for this show, he was involved in the creative process, but again, he wasn't like the main person directing it, or he wasn't like the writer or whatever. So it's similar kind of vein back to the original trilogy again. So again, it was kind of like, okay, this again, prequels are not received super well, but let's make them better by making this show. Yeah. And this show really does show that like the environment and the world and the overall plot of what is going on in the prequels is interesting. It just doesn't come out very well. And this show actually helps with that a lot. So, but anyway, yeah, so they started with this very shortly after the prequels came out. Again, the theatrical film was in 2008, and then the show sort of picked up. I'm not sure quite, like, exactly the months or days or whatever, but the show did formally start up in 2008, and it continued through 2013. And then, while they were finishing up season 6, Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2014, and they were stopped.
Okay.
And so season 6 was released when it was like half done. It was 13 episodes. And there was originally going to be 8 seasons. So the first 4 seasons are 22 episodes, and season 5 is 20 episodes. So they were all going to be 8 like 20-ish episodes per season.
Yeah.
And so we ended up with like basically 5.5 seasons out of the planned 8. So there was some like plot lines they wanted to do that they never did. Some of which ended up being turned into like other media. Like there's a book, Dark Disciple, which was supposed to be like a really big like main arc of season 7. And there's also a comic series that is important for actually understanding something that the show never goes into. But then there's, of course, recently just earlier this year, the whole thing about season 7 coming out. So this was basically like, okay, let's at least finish the show. Because again, they had like they had an ending in mind. To actually end the show, and they never actually got to show that. So that was the main point of this new season 7, was to actually show the ending. And the ending of the show takes place at the same time as their Revenge of the Sith movie.
Okay.
So that was the plan kind of all along. I mean, I'm sure the minute details of the thing changed a little bit, but that was the plan. So we did kind of actually get to an end. Now, again, there were still things that they wanted to tell, but we don't have those.
Right.
So it's not like it's complete and it's exactly what they wanted to from the beginning, but at least they have an ending now, whereas before it just kind of stopped. So
yeah,
so that's kind of the story with that. But yeah, so so you mentioned Anakin, you mentioned Padme. I mean, Obi-Wan was again already at least decent in the movies, and he's good here too. So
yeah.
But I do like how they still add to it though, like with Satine, right? That's a big example for that. Any comments on that?
I like Satine. It was kind of funny seeing someone that's on equal ground with Obi-Wan too.
Yeah.
in terms of snarkiness.
Oh yeah.
They have a good dynamic.
Yep.
And I'm thinking of A New Hope, and I'm like, Satine either doesn't make it, or maybe they got married and like she died early. I don't know.
If you watch more of the show, you will see more of Satine. That's what
And
I
I
will say.
guess what happens to her? Question mark.
I'm not going to say anymore.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so there's that. Yeah, the only thing that I feel like I kind of you didn't really get to see, in terms of the show as a whole from these 6 episodes, that you didn't really get to see the clones that much. They were there, right?
I only picked
But-
up on like one name that they kept saying, which was Rex. Is he like the
Yeah,
main
Rex
clone?
was. Is he the main? Yeah.
Yes.
Is he like the leader of the clones?
He's
Okay.
he's the captain of Anakin's clone troop.
Okay.
And yeah, so he's again one of the main ones. I guess he is the main one. But there are also others. Like there's there's Fives, there's Echo, there's Jesse, there's crap. There's a lot. I just can't remember them all the time off the top of my head. But yeah,
Do we also learn what happened to those particular clones? Because in Star Wars, it doesn't seem like all the clones are nameless and
Right.
stuff like that.
so
Mhm.
it's pretty much just kept with the show. Okay, there is also after Clone Wars ended with the Disney buyout, they then started to make another show, which was Star Wars Rebels, and so that is similar kind of 3D CGI animated, and that takes place in the couple years leading up to the original trilogy, and so
Okay.
there were some things that were kind of picked up upon and sort of expanded on in that show that kind of were left off when this was canceled the first time.
Mhm.
So there's some stuff with that. Yeah,
So I guess the clones appear in Rebels?
well, it's so okay. The overall thing with kind of the in-universe explanation as to like what happened to them, is that since the whole idea was that they were kind of like bred for combat, but so they had to have like accelerated aging so that they were like old enough to actually fight by the time the Clone Wars happened. So a lot of it is actually that like by the time the original trilogy happened, like a lot of them are just like super old and would have like died just from like old age.
Oh.
So yeah. It's kind of sad, but that actually gets to another thing where like again in the movies they're just like mindless faceless soldiers, who cares, right? So
Yeah.
then it gets to like, well, wait, now that you're actually giving them character and showing their relationship is, again, not romantic, but just how they interact with like Anakin and the other Jedi or stuff, then how does like the whole turn in Revenge of the Sith, like how does that work? Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
They go into that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely stuff where like, again, because you think like clones, why do I care about the clones? And it's like, but you do care about the clones if you actually watch the show, and it's like, oh, okay, so yeah. There are some very good clone episodes. One of the ones that one of those arcs like everyone says is like one of the best, and yeah, it is one in season 4 that's almost entirely focused on the clones, and yeah, that's very good. There's another one that's in season 6 that's clone focused that's very good. Yeah, but there isn't really one early on the show besides just random stuff. There's a thing in season 1 that again like introduces like several of the main ones, but it's just kind of like a one-off thing and doesn't really fit into what I was going for. So, but yeah, and then of course you also have Ahsoka.
Yay!
Your baby.
Yes.
So it is interesting because like again when the show first came out, like she was not received well at all.
Oh, really?
No. And the thing is like it's like multi-layered, but the main thing is that she feels like, oh, here's this like kid and like somehow she's like on equal footing with everyone else, and like, But like the thing is, she's not like again. It's of course she is skilled, but like especially early on, she is not as good as like the other people in terms of what she's doing, and also she is like 14, I think, at the beginning of the series. So she, especially in terms of her behavior, because people were commenting early on like, oh, she's like kind of like annoying and like doesn't really know what's going on, and I'm like, but that's like the point. So and you definitely, it is something where you definitely see her growth through the series. You definitely see that, and it's also actually it's kind of physical too. So there were a couple times that like characters were redesigned as like the show went on. Most of them are pretty small redesigns. Like for example, Anakin's hair gets like a little bit longer, and like their clothes like changes a little bit to like transition from Attack of the Clones to Revenge of the Sith. But Ahsoka, you can actually like you can see her like physically age a little bit. Especially like, you know, like the things like on like the side of her head, those get longer, and by the time actually you get to like season 7, they're like down like past like her stomach. So
oh wow,
yeah, and like, but then she also gets like a clothing redesign in season 3 that I think looks better, because like her early like season 1 and 2 like design is like is like but like I think her season 3 on design is better. So and that's also when she gets like a secondary lightsaber as well, which I'm kind of surprised that they never actually like go into that. So like where she got it, but she just has it at one point in season 3, and you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, but yeah, I think what I like so much about her is that you really, because she's kind of seen as like, you know, again in the beginning, the kind of naive, idealistic person who doesn't really know what's going on. And then as things develop and as things progress, she learns what's going on, but she's struggling between like, what should I do versus what do I have to do? And it's very much sort of, it's kind of an audio stand-in in a way of like, you know what should happen, but you know what you also have to do at the same time. And sort of balancing that. And it's sort of like, you know how like Anakin, you know, he fell to the dark side because of his personal attachments or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, Ahsoka's kind of like that, but not in the like, I'm mad, so I'm going to kill everyone kind of way. Because, and this is something that, again, the show does well, is it does show that, like, the Jedi as, like, an institution is, like, not exactly good. Because, like, they kind of mentioned this here with Satine saying that, like, you know, if you're a peacekeeper, you're not exactly doing that, right?
Yeah.
And so they get into that more, and, like, also, for example, how in the Cad Bane arc, actually, like, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, they all try to like kind of work like Cad Bane's mind that's like kind of like torture-y, you know, and so there's stuff like that, and that gets expanded on that's done really well, and like Ahsoka's kind of sees that as well, and so that's actually another thing that's kind of like, you know, oh, why is Anakin so easy to like throw away the Jedi or whatever, and it's like it's kind of it sort of separates the individual person, the person that is a Jedi versus like the order and the institution that is the Jedi. You know, and I like, it's kind of like, and really, if you think about it, the Jedi in the prequels are kind of like religious fundamentalists in a way.
Yeah.
So, and this show actually like shows that well, instead of just being like, oh, they're bad now for a reason. You know what I mean? That's like actually makes sense. So it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, seeing that development for Ahsoka, and also through her development and also her interactions with Anakin, you definitely understand. Again, it helps expand on Anakin as well, in terms of how his behavior changes and what he does. So, I don't know, that's kind of my take on everything, and yeah, so I don't know, I think I've said before that this is one of my favorite shows, and it's weird because like, if I were to, you know, I don't know, rate like every single episode and like average all of them or whatever, it would be good, but it wouldn't be like, you know, 10 out of 10, right? And it's definitely, it's very much like kind of better than like the sum of its parts. And I think part of that is because, again, since it is split into these arcs, if there's an arc that's just kind of okay, like it doesn't detract from something else that happens later. Right.
That's
you can
true,
kind of just, if you want to watch, like rewatch it, or again, if you guys want to continue watching it, you do not have to watch all of it. And you can totally get a full experience of watching like half of it or whatever, right? I mean, there's some things you have to see, but like, you know. So there's that. And then also, like, this stuff that is good is really good, and you don't need to like, you don't have to sit through like a bunch of stuff that's just kind of okay to get to all the stuff that's really good. And And also, I think it really works in a sense that's like, again, what we were saying about how it builds on the actual prequel movies and just the whole kind of universe as a whole and the environment and everything. So it makes, not only is it itself good, but it kind of makes other Star Wars things better.
Yeah.
Just by existing. So that's kind of how I see it. And then also I would say that it has this show has my favorite scene of anything like ever in it. So any movie, show, or game, like this actually has my favorite scene of anything. So yeah, like basically when it's good, it's very good, and when it's bad, it's not even that bad. It's just kind of like eh.
Okay.
And yeah, and also because of the nature of the show, you can just kind of skip a lot of that. So yeah, I guess that's why for me I kind of put this so high. But
I would be interested in watching more of it. And similarly to how what you said and everything, it does like give more background information to certain things. Like we went to Mandalore and we heard about what happened to like the warrior Mandalorians that we end up seeing in the Mandalorian. And then you mentioned, Valen, that one of the planets that was mentioned in Solo also was mentioned in one of the episodes too.
Oh yeah.
Actually, so yeah, speaking of Mandalore, I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit more. So the original plan for us in doing this was that I wanted to do Clone Wars first and then Mandalorian, because the idea was, here's how Mandalore is, and then like 30 years later, look what happened, right? So it's kind of so now it's sort of the opposite direction. But still, there's like kind of, I don't know. What did you think about that? Is that I imagine that's not what you expected for Mandalore.
No.
No. Yeah, I was just like, what? So they're not all wearing helmets all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mandalore's like the story of Mandalore again. Like, of course, it was originally expanded a lot in terms of like other books, and actually the Knights of the Old Republic games actually touched a lot about like old Mandalore history.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of the current canon for Mandalore, it's pretty much all been done through shows. And basically, a long time ago, like thousands of years ago, there was a big fight between Mandalorians and Jedi. And that's also where the blade that the dude had.
The black one?
Yeah, so that's called the Darksaber, and that's also something that shows up multiple times in things going forward, because that guy's that you can imagine that guy, the head of the Death Watch, is
the guy with the baby haircut.
Yeah, he is recurring, and so he has that again. So that Darksaber was from that the history thing, and then you've had here's this kind of warrior people or whatever, but recently there's kind of been this push like, oh, we should be peaceful now, but some of them are like, but we were warriors, and so that's the whole thing with Death Watch. And actually, this is technically a bit of a spoiler for the Mandalorian episodes you haven't seen, but you know how it's shown for the actual Mandalorian guy that we follow when he was a kid, there's the flashbacks for that, right?
Yeah.
And you see actually at one point that the battle that's going on is that there's like the battle droids that are there from the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So what it's specifically shown is that the Mandalorians that actually save him as a kid during the Clone Wars was Death Watch.
Oh.
So they actually saved him. And so it's not super clear exactly when that falls in the Clone Wars timeline, because it's like, wait a minute, but it seems like Death Watch is working for the Separatists right now, which has the droids, so why would they be fighting the droids at some point? So again, it's a little bit unclear, but that does add a kind of another layer of like, that's sort of, again, the warrior clan thing and stuff like that. And again, there is more history in terms of like what happened to Mandalore. Well, again, if you watch more of the show, Mandalore is brought up again and stuff happens, but even like after that, for example, when the Empire is around, what happens to Mandalore and what are they doing with that, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually get to the area that the timeline where the Mandalorian show takes place? And that is it is a multi-step journey, but I just think it's interesting to see the quite different environment. But yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts before I show off something? Because I have a visual aid.
Okay.
I'm curious what the visual aids are.
No final thoughts really. I mean, it's kind of interesting just kind of seeing how one would get from these episodes to what happens at the end of like the third prequel.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's a journey.
Yeah. Would you also potentially be interested, again, maybe just like seeing some of the other arcs?
Yeah, I'll probably.
Yeah.
I'm most interested in like the ones that kind of are, I guess, are the more canon or like plot related ones
Right.
because, like, you know, I think the cursory details I don't feel like are super necessary. I'm just very interested in how like it goes from this with Cad Bane, who I assume we'll see again,
Yeah.
to whatever happens at the end of what just ended like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's how the visual aid comes into play. So I will
Oh.
be I'll be putting this in the video, but you can see it now. So I made this.
Oh my god, it's
So-
a spreadsheet.
Let me explain. So I just have it in halves here because it doesn't all fit on one side otherwise. So first of all, the first thing to know is that the episodes are not in chronological order necessarily. So the first episode chronologically is... Oh shoot, I just realized I made a mistake. Oh no, I already made the image. Crap. Okay. Oh well. The first episode chronologically is actually season 2, episode 16. So that's what this is here. So these two should actually be switched. So oh well. But
fine.
everything else should be correct though. So but then it goes from there just down the list in chronological order. So it goes season 2, episode 16, then season 1, episode 16, then the film, then season 3, episode 1, then season 3, episode 3, then season 1, episode 1. You just keep going down like that, right?
Why did they do this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I've seen some people say that, like, oh, well, they had, you know, like, for example, the first episode of the show, they had that idea, right? But then later they were like, hey, we can kind of do a little prequel to the first episode. But it's like, it is confusing a lot of the time because, like, wait, where are we in the timeline? Because there are kind of moments where, like, some characters show up where, like, you're like, wait a minute, but you died in an episode earlier. So, like, and first of all, so the whole thing with Cad Bane, that was like, okay, that was a decent introduction to him, right?
Yeah.
That's not the first episode he shows up in.
What?
He shows up in episode 1, season 1, episode 22, which is way down here in the timeline in the middle of season 3.
Oh.
So he just shows up in that episode, and you're like, and everyone seems to like know who he is, and you're like, who are you? And it's like, it's like really confusing. So
Man, I'm just like, if you're gonna make a TV show, please, for the love of God, make it in order.
yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. This is like kind of my one main criticism. So like, but given that, I've seen the whole show twice. I've seen it in release order and I've seen it in chronological order. And the one caveat for chronological order is that you do see some kind of like noticeable like animation quality changes. Because like season 1, for example, does look worse than season 3, right? So sometimes that looks a little weird. But like besides that, it's just easier to follow if you do it chronologically. Even if you do watch all of the episodes in order. So anyway, but I have the episodes split into 4 different categories. So there's the essential category, which is basically you must watch these episodes just to like get the story of what's going on. So that's, again, the Mandalore stuff we watched is kind of the first things I'd say is essential. Then you have 2 arcs in the middle of season 3 that are essential. You have this mid-season 4 arc. This is actually the one that I mentioned about the clones that's people like a lot.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Then you have the end of season 4, which this is technically a spoiler when watching the show, but everyone kind of knows it at this point. Darth Maul is still alive. So
Oh yeah.
that's when we
Yeah.
get into that. And that, of course, comes important for, later going on. And then the season 5 stuff expands on that, and also stuff with Ahsoka. Season 6 is also more stuff, and then, of course, you have the final arc of the series, which, you have to watch. So then there's the highly recommend category, which is, like, it's not essential, but it's either, like, it is context that is very important context, or it's just like really good. So even if it's kind of its own thing, I think it's really good. So like, why skip it, right? For example, so the Cad Bane arc I put there because again, it's not like super related to the other stuff, but I think it's a good kind of starting place. Is like, here's a good solid arc of what to do. But then you have, and a lot of this, like for example, the last arc here in season 3 is entirely about like Ahsoka as she's stuck on a place in a place and but kind of by herself, and so like it's good characterization for stuff that happens later, right? And then let's see. Oh, this arc, episodes 15, 16, 17, 18 of season 4. This is my second or third favorite arc of the series. It is kind of its own thing. Obi-Wan pretends to be a bounty hunter.
Oh,
What?
Yeah, it's. I don't want to say anymore, but it's really good, and it's so. Yeah. And then so that stuff's really good. And then so then there's the recommend category, which is mostly like, again, kind of good context. I definitely say like, unless like it maybe like look at like maybe the brief like couple sentence plot summary of some of the episodes and think that seems interesting, I'll check it out, right? But I would say like kind of maybe for the stuff in the recommend category, I would err on you should watch it, but like if you don't watch it, it's not like you're totally missing out on something. But even then, I still think there's stuff that's good. Like I think this big arc in season 2 is quite solid. The arc at the end of season 2 actually involves Boba Fett. And what happened to him. Let's see. This episode, so near the top, episode 301, and then 105, and then down to 302. Those are kind of like, again, like a main clone group that's actually pretty good.
Okay.
And again, the film I have as recommend just in a sense of like, this is the beginning, and if you're curious about that, and also everything else in the recommend category or better is better than the film. So that's sort of the idea with that. And then the if you want categories, those, I don't even say this is necessarily bad. Again, they're just kind of like, some of them are actually pretty good, but it's like, it's pretty good, but there's no like really broad scale benefit to watch them.
Okay.
So basically, if you want is, again, like look at the synopsis, and if you think, hey, that seems interesting, I might be curious to check that out, you can, but I would definitely, for example, if say, hey, do I need to watch any of this? I would say no. But again, because I know some people might be like, hey, I like that episode. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just kind of, it's there. So, let's see. Is there anything else specifically I want to touch on for this? I don't think so. So I mentioned, again, how season 6 was sort of halfway done, and then it was kind of canceled. So here in the extras thing down here, so these U's, there were 2 arcs that were actually put out as, like, unfinished, like, animated things online. One of those actually became the first arc of season 7. So that's what this is, 701, 702, 704. But the other one is... Again, so the other one is still unfinished, but you can find it online. And I think it's actually better than the one that became the one for the beginning of season 7, because it provides more, it focuses a lot more on Anakin and Obi-Wan and their connection, and it also talks about some stuff that happened previously, and it actually connects to the whole thing about, like, the Death Star super laser. In kind of an interesting way. So I was like, that's why so again, the animation is like, it's not finished, it's terrible, right? But like, the story of it I actually think is kind of interesting. And then I mentioned also the Dark Disciple book, and then the Son of Dathomir is the comic series that was kind of brought up, that actually, the Son of Dathomir comics actually do bridge, like, what basically Darth Maul's story before and to season 7, because otherwise it's like not explained, and it's kind of like, oh, he's just here, okay. So, yeah, and then also, so season 7, I guess I'll go into this a little bit more detail. The first arc of season 7, I think, is fine. It's decent. It's just, I don't think there's any particular, like, super great thing about it, but it's fine. The second arc of season 7, a lot of people shit on it, because they say it's boring and it's slow. And it is kind of slow, and granted, the fact that it is 4 episodes is I think a lot, because like there's one episode that kind of feels like, what was the point of it? Literally, characters start in a room, they leave and stuff happens, and then they end back in the same room. And it's like, what what was accomplished here, right? So I get that, but I think there is an interesting enough characterization that I think that's why I put that as like the recommended versus if you want. And also it does sort of kind of lead into the final arc also. So yeah, but the final arc is very good. And actually the final arc is interesting because it's edited in a way that's a little bit different, because you know how like the editing for how all of these episodes start in, it's like, here's your bombastic intro and the narrator telling you what's going on or whatever, right? So that's true for like every episode, but not the last four. So the idea with the last four is that like, and I think this was the idea just in general, was that the last four episodes, if you were to watch them together, are basically like a film.
Oh, okay.
So, and the idea is like they're kind of like bookending the series with two films in a sense. So, yeah, that was the. And again, it is very good. So, yeah. So, I would say if you were to go through it in this, I would say at least watch this stuff in highly recommend and essential. You know, going in chronological order, and then I would also, you know, recommend watching the recommend ones. But if you don't have to. And then if there's anything else that you want to see, then you can as well. So that's kind of my opinion of that. And I am annoyed that I just noticed now that I messed up the very first part. 216 and 116 is supposed to be swapped, but everything else besides that should be correct. So, yeah. And also now you know what the order of the episodes are, because otherwise it's like, how do you know?
So we did kind of watch it in order.
Yeah, so
in terms of essential and highly recommended.
Right, so yeah, of the two first call, basic again, like if you were to, what I would say is the minimum that you should watch is essential and highly recommended, and if that's what you want to do, you've watched the first two things of that, I would say. So
yeah,
Okay.
So,
Yay!
yeah. And also, of course, I'm gonna put again. I want to put this in the video because I want to encourage other people to see this if they haven't already. So I would, again, to anyone else, also say at least watch highly recommended and essential, and again, I would also recommend in, again, the chronological order that is listed here as well. So that's my take on it. But anyway, I'm sure if you asked other people, they would maybe slightly disagree on some of these placements for the arcs, but whatever, it's my list, so there you go. So yeah, any last minute thingies before we wrap this up and move on to our final thing of Star Wars month?
I don't think so.
I'm good.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, it's time.
To duel.
For the
Actually,
controversial last film.
Tara, what you said is there's more to that word than you might think.
Wait, really?
I'll explain.
We're gonna have a Yu-Gi-Oh crossover.
Yeah, this is
I'll explain. I'll explain. You'll see. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we are ending Star Wars month with The Rise of Skywalker. I have seen this twice. I saw it with my dad the day it came out, and then about half a week later I saw it with my mom. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about this.
Yeah, because I remember when you first saw it with your dad, you messaged me and you were like, I don't know how I feel about this. And I was like, okay. And then, like, when you saw it again, I was like, okay, you probably know how you feel about it now. And you were like, no, I don't.
Oh.
There are
It
things.
is now 6 months later.
There are things that I liked. There are things I did not.
Okay.
The issue is, again, as an overall thing, what do I think about it? And that's, I don't know. It's going to be very, because this is actually a movie, so we actually have to rate it. So I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do?
You have to commit.
I know. This is, yeah. And again, you, both of you don't really know anything.
No. Like I said, the only thing I know is like one like throwaway line, which doesn't really tell me much about what happens in the film whatsoever. So.
Yeah, and then the one thing I know, I don't know if it's canon or fanon, so that helps a little bit.
Okay. Well, you will see.
All I know now is that there's a apparently a duel is very important, and
Well, I
it
mean,
has
people
nothing to do
fight
with
in like
trading
every
card
single
games.
people fight in like every single movie, so it's not, saying
Yeah.
much. But no, there's more to, again, you'll see. Well, actually, you won't see. I will explain. It's confusing, I know, but you'll find out. So yes, next week is Rise of Skywalker, and will third time's the charm. Will I finally get an opinion on this that I
you
can
finally
settle?
have an opinion on it?
I don't. Okay, we'll see. Oh boy.